A lawyer, an environmentalist, and a teacher were going to the bathroom. The lawyer gets done, washes his hands, and uses the entire roll of tissue paper to wipe his hands. "I was taught to be thorough," he said. The environmentalist washes his hands and uses his own kerchief to wipe his hands. "I was taught to be environment friendly," he said. The teacher walks out without washing his hands. "I was taught not to piss on my hands," he says. 1. An elderly couple was sitting at the kitchen table on the morning of their 50th wedding anniversary. "You know," she said, "we were probably sitting in the kitchen across from each other 50 years ago." "Yeah," he said, "but we were probably so let's get now," she suggested. So they both took off all their clothes and sat across from each other. "You know," she said, smiling lovingly, "my feel just as hot looking at you today as they did 50 years ago." He replied, "I'm sure they are. One is in your coffee and the other's in your oatmeal." 2. An 89-year-old woman got caught shoplifting and was hauled before a judge in Cincinnati. Judge: "Ma'am, what exactly did you steal?" Old lady: "A can of peaches, Your Honor." Judge: "And why did you steal the peaches?" Old lady: "I was hungry." The judge sighed and rubbed his temples. "How many peaches were in the can?" Old lady: 6. Judge: "Then I'm sentencing you to 6 days in jail, 1 day for each peach." Before the judge could bring down the gavel, the woman's husband, who had been quietly sitting beside her, slowly raised his hand. Judge: "Yes? Do you have something to say on your wife's behalf?" Husband: "Yes, Your Honor. She also stole a can of peas." 3. The other day, I took my 92-year-old dad to the mall to get him some new shoes. Afterward, we decided to grab a bite to eat at the food court. While we were eating, I noticed my dad staring at a teenager sitting nearby. The teen had spiked hair dyed in a rainbow of bold colors: green, red, orange, and blue. My dad kept watching, and every time the teen glanced over, he caught my dad's gaze. Eventually, clearly irritated, the teenager turned to my dad and said sarcastically, "What's the matter, old man? Never done anything wild in your life?" Knowing my dad's quick wit, I braced myself. Without missing a beat, he calmly replied, "Oh, I've had my wild days. I was just wondering if you might be a reminder of one of them." 4. An older, weary-looking dog wandered into my yard one day. Judging by his collar and well-fed belly, it was clear that he had a home and was well cared for. The dog approached me calmly, and I gave him a few friendly pats on the head. He then followed me inside, made his way down the hall, curled up in a corner, and promptly fell asleep. An hour later he woke up, went to the door, and I let him out. The following day, he returned, greeted me in the yard, walked inside, and resumed his usual spot in the hall for another nap. This routine continued on and off for several weeks. Curious about his repeated visits, I decided to pin a note to his collar. "I would like to find out who owns this wonderful, sweet dog and let you know that he comes to my house almost every afternoon for a nap." The next day, the dog showed up with a new note pinned to his collar. It read, "He lives in a home with my non-stop chatting and nagging wife. He's trying to catch up on his sleep. Can I also come with him tomorrow?" 5. So, there was this stoner who decided to crash a wedding in another town. For the ultimate disguise, he dressed up as a woman and joined the ladies' side of the party. Now, being a true foodie, he overdid it at the buffet, ate so much that he ended up passing out. The women around him freaked out. One lady gasped, "Oh my gosh, she's fainted. Must be labor pains." They all huddled around, panicking. One woman bravely decided to check. She reached into his dress and suddenly pulled her hand back, exclaiming, "Oh, bless her heart. The baby's leg is sticking out already." I told my son, "You will marry the girl I choose," he said. "And oh," I told him, "she is Bill Gates' daughter," he said. "Okay." I called Bill Gates and said, "I want your daughter to marry my son." Bill Gates said, "No." I told Bill Gates, "My son is the CEO of World Bank." Bill Gates said, Okay. I called the president of World Bank and asked him to make my son the CEO. He said, "No." I told him, "My son is Bill Gates' son-in-law." He said, "Okay. This is how politics works." 7. An elderly man decided it was time to move on, so he moved into a retirement home. He packed his stuff and moved into a retirement home. On his first day there, as he was unpacking his stuff into his room, he could help but notice that the woman in the room across the hall was staring at him. He thought it was odd but decided not to let it bother him. Later that night, he went to the cafeteria to get dinner. He sat down at his table and, lo and behold, the woman from the hallway was sitting at the table next to him. There was no food on her table. She just sat there staring at him with fixed eyes. The man grew increasingly annoyed but didn't say anything. After a scrumptious meal, he went to the lounge to play nightly bingo. He was enjoying the game until he noticed the woman again, staring at him. He had enough. He went up to her and said, "Ma'am, I couldn't help noticing that you have been staring at me ever since I arrived. Could you please stop? It is a bit bothersome." She replied, "I am sorry, it is just that you look so much like my third husband." The man felt bad. "I'm sorry. If you don't mind me asking, how many husbands have you had?" "2. was the woman's reply. 8. A woman was caught with drugs in her hand by a cop while in the bathroom of a nightclub. The woman swears that the drugs are not hers and promises that, "They aren't mine, I found them here and I tried to flush them down the toilet. However, every single time I flush the drugs down the drain, they just keep reappearing magically in my hands or my pockets." The cop, obviously in disbelief, tells the woman, "Show me." So the woman tosses the bag of drugs into the toilet, then flushes it. The bag swishes down. The cop then stares at the woman's empty hand as the bag is flushed down. "Well," says the cop, "where are the drugs now?" "What drugs?" 9. Two elderly sisters, Sister Grace and Sister Margaret, were returning from the evening market. It was getting late, and they still had quite a walk ahead to reach their convent. Suddenly, Sister Grace grabbed Sister Margaret's arm, her voice filled with concern. "Do you see that man behind us? Is he following us?" Sister Margaret glanced back, her eyes narrowing. "It looks like he might be. What do you think he wants?" Without missing a beat, Sister Grace whispered, "I think he's up to no good. What should we do?" Sister Margaret, thinking quickly, replied, "Let's split up. I'll go left, and you take the right path to the convent." They parted ways, and a few minutes later, Sister Grace arrived safely at the convent. As she paced nervously, worried for her friend, Sister Margaret came running down the path, breathless but safe. Sister Grace rushed to her. "What happened?" Sister Margaret caught her breath and replied, "Well, I started running, and the man began chasing me." "What did you do?" asked Sister Grace, eyes wide. "The only thing I could think of," Sister Margaret said with a smirk. "I hiked up my habit and ran." Sister Grace gasped. "And what did he do?" Sister Margaret grinned. "He dropped his trousers." Sister Grace, holding her rosary, whispered, "And then what happened?" With a chuckle, Sister Margaret said, "Isn't it obvious? A sister with her habit up runs faster than a man with his trousers down." 10. I'm at Walmart, scanning and bagging my nearly $300 worth of groceries while the employee who's making $15 an hour stands by and monitors the process. Then this happened. Her, "Why are you double bagging all your groceries?" Me, "Excuse me?" Her, "You're wasting our bags." Me, "If you don't like the way I'm bagging my groceries, feel free to come over and do it yourself." Her, "That's not my job." Me, "Okay, then I'll bag my groceries however I like if that's alright with you." Her, "Why are you using 2 bags?" Me, "Because the bags are weak, and I don't want the handles to break or the bottoms to rip out." Her, "Well, that's because you're putting too much stuff in each bag. If you split the items into 2 bags, you wouldn't need to double bag." 10 seconds of me just staring at her. Me, So you want me to split these items in half and put half in a different bag so I don't need to double bag? Her. Exactly. Me. So, I would be double bagging anyway, just with a different method?